When my family inherited the old McAllister mansion, it felt like a dream come true. The house, with its grand facade and sprawling grounds, was the perfect blend of history and mystery. We couldn't believe our luck, imagining endless opportunities to explore and live out our fantasies in such a grand estate. Little did we know that some dreams quickly morph into nightmares. The discovery of the antique masks happened while we were exploring the mansion's attic. A large, ornately carved wooden cabinet stood against the far wall, covered in dust and cobwebs. Inside, behind glass doors, was a collection of masks, each more intricate and beautiful than the last. They represented various cultures and time periods, their craftsmanship exquisite and mesmerizing. My father, a history buff, was especially captivated. "Look at these, Sarah," he exclaimed to my mother, his eyes gleaming with excitement. "They must be priceless." Despite their apparent value, something about the masks felt off. One evening, driven by a mixture of curiosity and bravado, my father decided to try one on. He selected an elaborate Venetian mask adorned with feathers and gold filigree. As soon as he placed it over his face, his entire demeanor shifted. His warm, inviting eyes turned cold and distant, and his movements became stiff and unnatural. "Dad?" I called out, my voice trembling. He didn't respond. Instead, he began to laugh, a deep, guttural sound that didn't belong to him. My mother rushed to his side, trying to pull the mask off, but it seemed to have melded with his skin. After a frantic struggle, she managed to tear it away. My father collapsed, gasping for air, his eyes returning to their normal state. "It felt like something was inside me," he whispered, visibly shaken. In the days that followed, the mansion became a place of nightmares. We heard whispers in the hallways, saw shadows moving just out of sight, and objects inexplicably shifted positions. The masks in the attic seemed to pulsate with an eerie energy, as if they were alive. The breaking point came when Emily, despite her initial fear, couldn't resist trying on a mask. It was a simple white porcelain one, with hauntingly empty eye sockets. The moment it touched her face, she screamed, and then fell silent. Her body went rigid, and she started to speak in a language none of us recognized, the words harsh and guttural, echoing through the room. "Take it off her!" I shouted, rushing to help my mother. But the mask wouldn't budge, as if it had fused with her very being. Desperate, we contacted a local historian who specialized in occult artifacts. When he arrived, his face went pale upon seeing the masks. He explained that these were no ordinary antiques. They were vessels for a malevolent entity, one that could possess anyone who wore them. The entity thrived on fear and chaos, growing stronger with each possession. "We must destroy them," he said with grim determination. "But it won't be easy. The masks are bound to the entity, and it will fight to protect them." That night we gathered the masks in the mansion's grand fireplace. As we set them alight, the flames roared with unnatural intensity. The house shook, and a piercing scream filled the air. It felt as if the entity itself was being torn apart. Finally, the masks were reduced to ashes, and the eerie presence lifted from the house. Emily regained consciousness, her eyes filled with tears. She didn't remember much, but she felt an overwhelming sense of relief. Months passed, and life slowly returned to normal. The events at the mansion became a distant, haunting memory. But one day, as I was sorting through some old boxes in our new home, I found something that made my blood run cold. At the bottom of a dusty box was a small, ornate key, the key to the wooden cabinet in the attic. I stared at it, my mind racing. How had it ended up here? Had we truly destroyed all the masks? My heart pounded as I went to find my parents. Reluctantly, we returned to the mansion. As we approached, an overwhelming sense of dread washed over me. The house looked just as we'd left it, but something felt different, more sinister. We entered cautiously, our footsteps echoing in the silent halls. We made our way to the attic, and to our horror the cabinet was back, standing proudly against the wall, pristine as if it had never been touched by flames. The masks were there too, gleaming in the dim light, seemingly untouched by the fire. A chilling realization dawned on us. The entity hadn't been destroyed. It had merely been lying in wait, biding its time. And now, with the key back in our possession, It had found a way to draw us back. In a final, desperate act, I grabbed the nearest mask and hurled it against the wall. It shattered into pieces and a deafening scream echoed through the attic. The other masks followed, exploding one by one until the cabinet itself crumbled into dust. The house shook violently, and we were thrown to the floor. When the chaos finally subsided, we found ourselves lying in silence. The masks were gone, and the oppressive presence had lifted. We left the mansion for good that day, vowing never to return. The key, now a charred remnant, was buried deep in the woods, far from any human reach. But even now, I can't shake the feeling that we've only delayed the inevitable. Some things are never truly destroyed, merely waiting for their next opportunity.